There are some cities that you just don't associate with major sports that actually do major sports. In the NFL, you have to think back. It's like, all those teams from the 20s and 30s, like Decatur and Frankfurt and Pottsville. Obviously, the NFL was a lot different back in the days. You paid $100, you had your franchise. Of course, $100 in the 30s was a drop in the bucket compared to the franchise values of the 2020s. In baseball, I mean, you had St. Louis having both an American League and a National League team at one time. You had Milwaukee actually have a team in 1901 for a few seasons before that team became the St. Louis Browns, who became the Baltimore Orioles. In hockey, you'd be shocked to know that Cleveland had an NHL team, not Columbus. Cleveland had an NHL team called the Barons for 2 years in the 70s before it merged with the Minnesota North Stars. And of course, you'd be crazy thinking Utah has a hockey team now? They do. But what if I told you about the NBA and the fact that this city, you just don't think basketball with them? You think football and hockey, but you didn't think basketball. But I'm going to tell you a story about the Buffalo Braves and their crazy time. We're playing basketball sims. We're playing basketball sims. He's playing what if NBA? Cutter's doing what if NBA? Yeah. Oh, all the teams around the world got to know that the Raptors are number one. But what about the Bulls, Wizards, and Pistons? They all have great what ifs. Stories about old teams like the Kansas City Kings and maybe even the Minneapolis Lakers. But we all know we're going to do some basketball. He's doing basketball. He's doing basketball. What ifs? Cutter's doing what if NBA? So what if NBA? So here's how things go. The city of Buffalo got a NBA expansion franchise in 1970. The NBA decided to try to expand to more cities and all that from the 9 to like 17. So Buffalo got one of those franchises alongside Cleveland and Portland. So Buffalo was going to host NBA games. The Buffalo Braves, they called themselves. Trying to go with the Native American motif. The Buffalo Braves were a decent squad, and you got a basketball team in Buffalo, whereas the city just got, well, the NFL in 1970 after they played in the AFL, and the hockey team, the Sabres, came in 1970 as well as an expansion team. So Buffalo was getting major sports teams. They have never gotten a baseball team. So the Buffalo Braves looked good. They played out of the odd where the hockey team was, but they also played home games in one of the most craziest atmospheres. And I will talk about that when I talk about the Buffalo Braves team I want to talk about. Buffalo went through in 1978 when one of the most major franchise trades happened, as the Boston Celtics owner and the Buffalo Braves owner traded franchises. John W. Brown wanted control of the Boston Celtics. I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, the Boston Celtics are a legendary franchise. So he traded away his Buffalo franchise rights to some other guy who who was the Boston owner. So he got his cushy job. And it reminds sports fans of Jeffrey Loria's play as Montreal owner. And then in 2003, he got his wish by owning the Florida Marlins. So he traded his rights to Florida. The Florida owner, John Henry, would now become the Red Sox main owner, and Montreal would be owned by MLB and barred from doing certain things, including calling up players for the September stretch drive, in which Montreal was closing the wild cards, and that cost them dearly. And of course, Montreal has spent one more year in the league. And may I digress? Fuck you, Bud Selig. The simple fact, boys and girls, is that um, Buffalo had a team, and it wouldn't last long. Buffalo would be cursed as they actually had to give up Moses Malone and a few other players due to signing problems and all that. And it actually worked out against Buffalo in such a way. The Buffalo franchise would be moving to San Diego to become the San Diego Clippers, as the ship, the Clippers. So that's what happened. They played in San Diego for a few years. They had Bill Walton, but he was hurt usually. They had Swen Nader, which was good. And the San Diego Clippers were featured in an NBA game in 1979 on opening night when they took on the LA Lakers and Magic Johnson, and Kareem beat them with the skyhook. And yeah, San Diego had Joe Jellybean Bryant. San Diego would last a few years before Donald Sterling would actually move the team from San Diego to Los Angeles to compete with the Lakers. They played at the LA Sports Arena, whereas LA the Kings would play. No, well, the Lakers would play where the Kings are, the Great Western Forum. And of course, a lot of Clipper fans were jealous of the Lakers being the little sister or the little brother to the Lakers and all that. There was actually a time when the Clippers were decent and the Lakers weren't, but that's barely there. And the team's been in LA and all that. And yes, that will be the LA Clippers will be the future to my next Cutter NBA What if you must know. So anyway, let's take a look at the Buffalo Braves and their best season. So anyway, the 1975 Buffalo Braves, this was the fifth season for the team in the NBA. And their third under Jack Ramsey, who would go on a couple years later to coach the Portland Trailblazers to victory. Now let's look at the Buffalo Braves in a sense. John Brown, Y. Brown, I call him W, sorry, swapped franchises with Boston Celtics owner Irv Levin, who then moved the team to San Diego. So, anyway, the Braves had trouble with their arena feature. They would have third choice of dates for the auditorium. The Buffalo Sabres would get first choice, and then Kansas. I know I'm spelling it wrong. I'm saying it wrong. Actually, had choice. So the Buffalo Braves had third choice. They would play 16 home games in a 5-year span at Maple Leaf Gardens of all places. So it was just unusual. The scheduling issues of the Buffalo Auditorium, and they had to play games in Toronto. So Canada was going to get some NBA games. Well, they got 16. I wish that there was actually footage of the NBA being the Buffalo Braves in Toronto. Nevertheless, the Braves actually played internationally to expand their fan base beyond Western New York and into the greater Toronto area, which the Bills did for 5 seasons before they said no. So, anyway, Buffalo made a big move passing on Calvin Murphy and picked John Hummer from Princeton as their first round draft pick. Murphy would be picked by the Rockets and would be one of the best free throw shooters of all time. So yeah, Dr. Jack Ramsey came across Bob McAdoo, legend player. Buffalo drafted him and it worked out quite well. 74-75, we'll talk about that. And then there were a modest success, if you will. A lot of people said Kansas was to blame for everything. So anyway, there was actually rumors circulating that the Braves would go to Miami and all that, but the city of Buffalo filed a suit to block the move. So anyway, they would dismantle the Braves. Jack Ramsey would leave. The Braves would trade Bob McAdoo to the Knicks midway through the 77 season. And then they actually picked up Moses Malone from Portland. And after 2 games, he was traded to Houston for 2 draft picks. And it actually bit Buffalo in the butt because Moses Malone was a legend and all that. So yeah, the team moved to San Diego and all that. So anyway, let's talk about the 74-75 season, the best season I think they had. They lost Gar Hurd, Jim McMillan, Ernie DeGregorio due to injuries. Gar Hurd would be a famous name the next season, 76, for the Suns, hitting that famous double overtime shot against the Celtics when they lost. Well, that was a game tire. It's Catherine Mealy in the background. Buffalo would win 49 games. It would be the best mark for the franchise until the Clippers had a better mark in the 2012 strike shortened season by winning percentage. Amazing that the Clippers are so cursed that It took him until 2012. Bob McAdoo was the NBA MVP. An MVP. The Buffalo Braves had the NBA MVP. The Clippers franchise had an NBA MVP, where it could have either gone to a Celtic, a Laker, or even a Knick. But yeah, they actually made the playoffs and all that. The NBA draft happened. Of course, it was more rounds. It was like 10 rounds, whereas it's 2 rounds nowadays. But the Braves did well. They picked up Tom McMillan from the University of Maryland. You know, Maryland was a good team in '74 and missed out on a NCAA berth because of the one per conference rule. So that actually Maryland laws actually made the NCAA change course, and conferences could have a couple of automatic teams. The 74-75 Braves had Ken Charles, Ernie DeGregorio, Bernie Harris, Garfield Hurd, Jack Marin, Bob McAdoo, Jim McMillan, Paul Ruffner, Dale Schluter, Randy Smith, Jim Washington, Bob Weiss, and Lee Winfield. McMillan would actually go to Europe to hone his skills before heading to Buffalo. So anyway, Buffalo started out 16-4, which was shocking and all that. Bob McAdoo put up 34.5 points per game. MJ can only dream about that. DeGregorio, who was the rookie of the year the previous year, actually only played 31 games. Jim McMillan would battle illness, the former Laker, and only played 20 games. He missed 20 games, and Gar Hurd missed 15. Buffalo did have good attendance and all that, but they did play games in Toronto. So the Braves would lose 3 of their 4 April games to win 49 games. They were third in the East. Boston won the division and were first in the conference by a tiebreak with Washington. So the rules were at the time of the 9 teams in the Eastern Conference, only 5 would make the playoffs. The top 3 would get byes. Houston and New York, being the 4 and 5 seeds, would have to play a preliminary round series to face the number 1 seed, which would be the Celtics. And I believe the Rockets won that one. Yeah, it's weird having Houston in the East of all teams, because Houston was more central through Texas. So the playoffs happened against Washington. They were the 3 seed. Washington was number 2. They shocked the Bullets in game 1, but the Bullets returned the favor in game 2. And then every home team won. Gregorio missed the playoffs. McAdoo played over 46 minutes during the playoffs. That's unheard of. Even Kobe and MJ didn't do that. The Bullets were fantastic and all that. So anyway, yeah, it took 7 games and all that. Back then in the NBA in '75, it was, you know, they rotated. It was 1-1, 1-1, 1-1, 1 the rest of the way, which was weird. I mean, the Capitol Center, yeah, we hosted the first 2 games, which they didn't. And yes, the Capitol Center did have the Washington Capitals because that was the first year they had Capitals. That's right. But yeah, Washington won in 7 games in the series. McAdoo was named MVP. Matt Guokas was traded to Chicago for Bob Weiss. Matt Guokas is a good player in a sense. But yeah, Buffalo, this was their best season, losing in 7 games to Washington. They were game 7 win away from going to the Eastern Finals, which we will simulate to see if the Buffalo Braves could take care of another team with the letter B, Boston. So the Buffalo Braves of 1975 taking on the 1975 Boston Celtics. Buffalo winning 49 games, Celtics 60. So, of course, what if Buffalo had been Washington? Now, Washington did go to the NBA Finals in real life, being swept by the Golden State Warriors. So, yeah, Boston, 60 wins. I can't believe Boston didn't even make the NBA Finals, but we're going to play this game. Game 1 in Boston, and Buffalo heads to Boston, wins 105 and 101. McAdoo, 37 points, 20 rebounds. McAdoo, Wackadoo. 43 minutes to play, 37 points. Randy Smith put up 16. Gar Hurd. Now, of course, what if McMillan, Hurd, and DeGregorio were actually healthy? The bench, 14 points from Jack Marin in 13 minutes with Bob Weiss, Jim Washington, Ken Charles, Lee Winfield, Daryl Shooter. The 35 Celtics had 28 points from Dave Cowens, powerful center. JoJo White with 20 points. Paul Silas, future NBA coach. John Havlicek, he stole the ball, 11 points. And Don Chaney, former head coach of the NBA, with 6. Jim Ard, Kevin Stackham, Don Nelson. Yes, that Don Nelson, legendary coach. I think he's dead. Paul Westphal, who would soon head to the Sixers and play the Celtics the Suns, and play them in the 76 finals. Hank Finkel and Glenn McDonald. Oh, Glenn McDonald was a hero. E-I-E-I-O. In triple overtime of the Celtics Suns. E-I-E-I-O. Look it up, people. Anyway, game 2. And we are going to do the 2-2-1-1-1 system that's in play. Game 2 sees the Celtics win on home turf. Cowens 32 points, 16 rebounds. McAdoo in 41 minutes scored 27 points, 11 rebounds. Jim McMillan drops 23. The bench, not so bad. 32 from Cowens, 17 from Havlicek, 12 from Chaney. The bench really wasn't helping too much for the Celtics. Game 3 in Buffalo at the Memorial Auditorium would see Buffalo fall 114-108 as Cowens puts up 26 points, 16 rebounds. JoJo White, 25 points of his own. Havlicek scored 17. Buffalo 27 from McAdoo in 16 rebounds in 43 minutes. Jack Marin put up 11 off the bench. So nice job there. Ken Charles. Game 3 is done. Game 4 would see the Celtics again win 114-100. Cowens 21 points, 15 rebounds. So Buffalo would lose out. JoJo White 22 points. Cowens 21. Every starter scored at least 12 points. Paul Westphal put up 12 points off the bench. They even had time to put Phil Hankinson and Steve Downing off the bench. Paul Ruffner, Bernie Harris played 1 minute each. For Buffalo, 26 from McAdoo in 42 minutes with 13 rebounds. So now they have to go to the Garden. And the Garden of Dreams will be more than a dream as Buffalo gets taken out in 5 thanks to Cowens. So Buffalo won game 1. It was like, holy smokes, they could do it. But no, the Celtics would have rocked Buffalo backwards. McAdoo 31 points in 41 minutes with 14 rebounds. Yeah, it's weird how Washington took care of Boston. Jim McMillan, 21 points. Randy said 16. DeGruger and Hurd could not score to save their lives. Bernie Harris did hit a three-pointer. Of course, in real life, three-pointers don't exist. The Celtics, 31 points from Cowens, 22 from JoJo White. So, yeah. So the 75 Boston Celtics would have moved on to the final, probably beating the Golden State Warriors. But, yeah, Buffalo would have been nice to get the Final Four, and maybe they get the momentum to keep their franchise in town. Not. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.